want to really share one or two very important programs which is happening in MMA. I thought before we commence, we'll do that. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before I will request Mr. Suresh Ram to deliver the form welcome address, let me briefly tell you what's happening in MMA, which we do not want you to miss it. On the 30th of this month, the science and art of marketing, a practitioner's perspective, which I knew then what I know now. It's by Mr. Amrit Thomas. This is a series under Palms Veterans. We are doing this. Mr. Balraman has kindly agreed to chair the session. We also have a special invitee, Mr. Neeraj Chandra, business advisor. This is happening on Saturday, October 30th at 6 p.m. Please do log in. Another interesting event, two more interesting events, not to be missed events. On the 1st of November, we are doing with the Income Tax Department, the changing environment of tax administration. We collaborate with them, and the Chief Commissioner and team of people are coming from there to attend to all your queries. If you have anything on your online booking or returns and whatever queries you have, including your NGOs or joint family, all that what you have the entire team is here, and we also have two chartered accountants who will be representing us. Interact with them so that we really want to bring in transparently what's happening. And this is a new initiative taken by MMA with the support of the Changing Environmental Tax Administration. Please do come. It's happening live at MMA Management Center on Monday, the 1st November, 10 a.m. to 1 a.m., 10 a.m. to 1:15, followed by lunch. It will be a good place for you to network, interact with them. Please do come for a member, and your prior registration is mandatory. You know that. And we have our All India Management Student Convention. I know that's a virtual backdrop what there in my screen. This is happening on the 18th. We have some again outstanding speakers. We'll share with you later, just to mark your diary. One final event, though number of events have been finalized for this month. Startup India Opportunities and Excitement. We have Tarun Mehta. He is a co-founder and CEO of Ether Energy. He's going to be in conversation with Mr. Shankar, Founder Camp, Director, Access Investment. This is happening on Monday, the 22nd November. So many more events are there. We already sent you all the details in your mail ID. Please do watch, please do read them, and keep attending all the events. In fact, in the month of November, many of our events are happening live at MMA Management Center. Do come, keep vaccinated. That's only a request. We want you to do that. Now, let me have the privilege of welcoming all the dignitaries. In the meanwhile, Mr. Suresh Raman. Suresh Raman is the Senior Vice President of MMA and also Vice President, Head of Chennai Operations. Let me briefly introduce Mr. Suresh. He's an alumni of Indian Institute of Birla Institute of Science and Technology, and over 30 years of experience in operation heads of Global Delivery Center. Suresh is also current role as a Vice President and Regional Head of Tata Consultancy Services, Chennai, manages its largest delivery center with over 70,000 associates, and he holds an honorary position and is a member and core committee of number of industrial bodies, including MMA, as its Senior Vice President. He has been a great source of support to us at MMA. I now request Mr. Suresh Raman to deliver the formal welcome address. Over to you, Mr. Suresh.
Thanks, Group Captain. Good evening to all of you. It's my privilege and honor to deliver this formal welcome address at this unique virtual discussion on the theme of the book Decisive Decade, India 2030, Gazelle or Hippo, organized by MMA with support from Konrad Adenauer Stiftung. I consider it as an honor to welcome this evening two eminent people, Mr. Kiran Karnik, former President NASSCOM and Director, Central Board of Directors, Reserve Bank of India, Mr. S Sandilya, Chairman, Eicher Group and Chairman of Mastek Limited. We consider it a privilege to e-launch and organize this discussion on the theme of this book by two great corporate leaders with multi-industry experience, I should say, and according to me, super achievers of our time. I also take this opportunity to welcome the members of MMA from all over Tamil Nadu and Pondicherry, members of IIMA Alumni Association, invitees and guests from other partner organizations, and a large number of participants all over the country who joined us online for this evening. As many of you are aware, MMA was established in 1956 with the aim of propagating management movement in this part of the country, and over the years, MMA has evolved into the largest management association in the country with over 8,000 members, organizing over 750 events a year. MMA has been adjudged the best management association in the country for the last 12 years in a row by the All India Management Association. I repeat, best management association in the country for the last 12 years in a row. And it's proud that we have done it this way, and Group Captain has been phenomenally working on this with all of us. And in recognition of this phenomenal contribution through numerous activities for the management professionals, entrepreneurs, students, and the public at large. In the last 18 months or so, MMA has organized a wide range of online events reaching over 3 lakh participants. India's economy, which contracted by 7.3% due to the COVID-19 pandemic, is expected to grow by 9.5% in 2021 and 8.5% in 2022, according to the latest projections released by IMF a few days ago. According to the latest World Economic Outlook update released ahead of the annual meeting of the IMF and the World Bank, the world is expected to grow 5.9% in 2021 and 4.9% in 2022. India has produced 33 unicorns in 2021 till date, while China has produced during this time about 19. The unending rally on the stock market and constant influx of FIIs are a few indicators of a robust economic strength. Our ability to hold the Eastern Advisory on the LAC and match their military deployment for the last 18 months speaks volumes of our military strength. With the milestone of 1 billion vaccinations achieved within a reasonable time frame as scheduled, and by many reliable estimates, the third wave, if any, may not be as disastrous as previous ones. There is indeed a sense of release, but particularly after the lethal second wave of the pandemic. With a splendid performance by our sports persons during recent Olympics, there seems to be an all-pervading sense of pride and happiness all around, which was not in the least expected a few months ago. The target for net zero emission by 2030 from a sustainable perspective is an imperative for corporates and government. Mr. Karnik, in his book, and so many others, have opined that this current decade from 2021 to 2030 would actually determine the trajectory of our growth in the next few decades. In the book, Mr. Karnik focused on 9 crucial areas to figure this out: democracy in politics, security, health, education, economy, demography, society, jobs and livelihoods, and technology. The book takes an optimistic view of the future and aims to create a shared national vision towards which it charts out a roadmap. This evening, we look forward to the insights from Mr. Karnik and Mr. Sandilya on various aspects that could make India not only the most prosperous, but importantly, the most happy country in the world. I once again welcome all the distinguished speakers and the thousands of viewers across the globe watching this program live. Wishing you all a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Suresh, for your welcome address. Thank you for joining in spite of your busy commitment at TCS. Now, the format of this evening, I'll have the privilege of introducing both the distinguished speakers for this evening, the author, and thereafter, I'm going to request Mr. Sandilya to share his insight on the theme of the book. Thereafter, Mr. Sandilya will request Mr. Kiran Karnik to share his insight, what made him write the book and how did he get the ideas. Yes, he has written in the book, how did he get the idea to write the book? But I think we should hear from him. It will make the evening more interesting. I also welcome people who have joined us this evening, Mr. Balraman and also Mr. Madhavan from USA. Thank you for connecting us to Mr. Kiran Karnik, giving us the privilege to host this evening, host this book launch this evening. Thank you, Mr. Madhavan. Let me have the privilege of introducing Mr. Kiran Karnik. Kiran Karnik, in the course of his career over the 4 decades, he has had unique experience of diverse sphere of government, business, and civil society with equal comfort and accomplishment. He is widely recognized for his work in the IT sector as a president of NASSCOM from 2001 to 2008, and for helping to put fraud hit Satyam Computers back on track as a chairperson of its government-appointed board. Earlier, he led Discovery Channel in India and South Asia, and so prior to that, he spent over 2 decades in the Indian Space Program. He was a member of the RBI Board and Scientific Advisory Council of Prime Minister and National Innovation Council. He is now involved in a number of educational and civil society activities. And Mr. Karnik is also distinguished alumnus of awarded from the IIM Ahmedabad, and he has been conferred many other awards, notably the most important being the Padma Shri. Many congratulations to you and very warm welcome to Mr. Kiran Karnik. We are really looking forward to hearing you. Now, let me have the proud privilege of introducing Mr. Sandilya. Mr. Sandilya is a commerce graduate from Madras and an MBA from Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. He started his career in 1969 with DCM Group of companies and thereafter a group headquarters in the finance function, followed by Union Carbide. Sandilya joined Eicher in the year 1975 when it was a very small company manufacturing agricultural tractors in his factory in Faridabad. And he was the managing director of Eicher Limited. He took over as a chairman and CEO in April 2020. He is the non-executive chairman from 2006 after the superannuation. He was the past president of SIAM and the past member of the board of Lean Global Network USA. past president of International Motorcycle Manufacturers Association, Geneva. Very warm welcome to Mr. Sandilya. It's a big privilege. Now I request Mr. Sandilya to share his insight on the theme of the book. Over to you. Before that, let's have the privilege of launching the book officially. The evening doesn't get fulfilled without the official launch of the book. Yes, we'll do that. And may I have the book on the screen, please? And let's have the privilege of launching the book authored by Mr. Kiran Karnik, Decisive Decade India 2020 Gazelle Hippo. Ladies and gentlemen, he launched the book. Many congratulations, Mr. Kiran Karnik. It's a lovely book. I know how much effort you put in to write this book. Now I'll request Mr. Sandilya to please share his insights on the theme of the book. Over to you, Mr. Sandilya.
Thanks, Captain Gopinath, Group Captain, and thanks Suresh Raman for the initial remarks, and also for Kiran Karnik for requesting me to kind of do this work and give me this honor. But I must confess, and I'm here today because of Mr. Madhavan, who is there from the USA, is participating in the event. And when he told me a few months ago that Kiran has written this book and he would like me to kind of do the honors of having a conversation with him in Madras and it's late, I said, no, I'm not keen for the simple reason I don't read books. I mean, I must confess that it's just one of those rare things. I know I'm so slow in reading, and I may be in the corporate world, but one of those rare species that who doesn't read books. But then he kept on persuading me. He kept sending me all kinds of mails, and do I not? Why this? Ultimately, I felt that Kiran also being 1 year senior to me like Madhavan, and I said, how can I say no? So ultimately, with a lot of hesitation, I said okay. Having said that, I immediately requested my daughter to order the book on Amazon. The book came in 2 days' time, and it was lying in my bedroom. Every day I used to think, oh, I have to read this book, and I had to keep waiting. Ultimately, I picked up the book on August 1st and started reading the book. I must confess, I read cover to cover. I finished reading the last chapter only day before yesterday. And I had a conversation with Kiran and I listened, at last I managed to read it. And therefore, I'm kind of fully in sync with what Kiran has to say in the book. But I must say it's an outstanding book. And I think why I'm saying this is that if anyone wants to know the kind of challenges this country has faced in the past, from a historical perspective, what kind of opportunities it has got, somebody wants to go into a little more details about our country, I think this book says it all. I think it's very good. And I would really recommend this book for people to read who have got keenness to know and have a keen understanding of what the country is all about. One more thing I would like to compliment Kiran, and I think that's something which, though I had known him for the last so many years from 1968, 67, 68, but I think it's something which I did not know, that this man can actually write a book without any fear or favor. He's been extremely candid. When he's going about the entire aspects of the historical perspective of what things went right in this country, what things went wrong in this country, why they happened, what they happened, what are the future of these scenarios, what are the risks that are there, whether it is democracy or politics or risks in terms of cyber risks or security in the borders, and you name it, whether it is education or health, he has highlighted every one of things that can go right or wrong. And that kind of a candidness in today's world of, I don't know what to call it, lack of tolerance for critical remarks, I think it takes a lot of guts. Kiran, my real compliments to you, and I really feel that you have done a fantastic job on this. I don't want to get into the theme of the book for the simple reason that that's his job. And I'm sure he's written the book, and I'm sure he will share. But I do have a lot of questions or some things that I'm going to cover later, and which I will take it up once Kiran finishes the summary of his book in terms of what he has covered in this, what he feels about it, what are his vision for it. Then I'll get into the questions and my comments on it. Over to you, Kiran.
Thank you, Sandilya. Mr. Suresh Raman, Senior Vice President, MMA, all those who have joined this call, thank you all for being here, and good evening to you, or I should say good day, knowing that there are people from around the world in different time zones.
Good day, yes.
Welcome. Also delighted to say hello to batchmates, friends from my alma mater, IIMA. I understand that MMA has been kind enough to invite them too, and happy to see some of them, old friends like Balram, who are there, and others I see recognize a lot of names. So delighted to be able to share some thoughts with all of you. And I must, like Group Captain and Sandilya, thank Madhavan, because it was his suggestion and his pushing that connected me once again to Group Captain Vijay Kumar and MMA. I say once again because Group Captain will remember that a previous book of mine, I think it was Crooked Minds, was also launched in MMA, and the privilege of having Mr. Lakshminarayan from Cognizant as the chair at that time. And we had a great discussion. It was physical. I wish I could be there this time too, because nothing like having people face to face, seeing reactions, watching languages, watching them as they react, having a cup of tea before and after, just chatting informally. But we miss those days. But the advantage of this, on the other hand, is that people like Madhavan and many others who are not in Chennai, not even in India, can join on this call. So the wonders of technology and, of course, the possible problems as we discussed earlier. And I'll get to some of that in a moment. But thank you very much, Suresh. And thank you, Group Captain, for hosting me on your great platform. It's always a pleasure. And a sentence in explanation why I say it's always a pleasure, not as some politeness, but for me, it's a special pleasure because only a few of you may know I actually grew up for many years in Madras. I yet refer to it as Madras because I was there in earlier years. So I have a special link and association with that city. Subsequently, I've not come so frequently, except occasional work trips for 1 day, 2 days. But always a pleasure to be somehow linked with this city for which I have so many happy and fond memories from, of course, ancient days. So that's a special thing to be on this platform. Let me speak a bit about the book, and I want to make this brief because I want to give more time to our discussion or chat between Sandilya and me, and then make sure we have enough time at the end of it for questions, comments, whatever from the many people who have taken the effort to join today. So let me start first with the title. A lot of people ask me that India 2035, decisive decade. Why decisive? Every decade is important. And, I think Suresh touched on that a bit. My own sense is that this is truly decisive because, I can elaborate on it, but let me just say 2 or 3 sentences. After 91, which marked in some sense a watershed in our economic thought and economic history, we moved on and progressed, I would say, very rapidly, particularly in the 10 years between roughly the end of the 90s and 2012, growing at a very robust rate of 8% plus. In fact, we had dreams of doing 10% a year and continuing on that route. Somewhere after 2012, and I've talked a bit in the book about why, we slowed down. And then in the last few years, number of things, new government, lots of hope, but then a bit of a slowdown, world economy slowed down, we seem to slow down, partly in sync with that, partly maybe on our own. Demonetization, GST were seen as, temporary obstacles, which they might have been, but they further led to a slowdown. And then, just as there were hopes of us getting back on track, COVID hit us. And as Suresh just summarized the figures so well, we've seen that we dropped hugely. And this year, despite the robust growth, all we will do is to be back where we were 2 years ago. So in effect, on the economy front, we have lost 2 years. Things look good ahead. But to me, therefore, this decade now is even more important. We've also had 2 other seminal events. Again, Suresh mentioned one of them, our little troubles with China in eastern Ladakh and across the border. For 30 years, we had peace and quiet on that front. Now we've got to divert a lot of effort, energy, mind space, and very importantly, resources to that angle and look there. And the second is, of course, the whole crisis which has been triggered by COVID, which is not related just to health, but relates also to education, where our young children, just as the economy has lost 2 years, many of them have lost 2 years, and sometimes worse because they've forgotten what they learned. So in many ways, it's even worse than the 2-year economic loss which you can catch up. So it's been a huge transition, and this decade now, at least the remaining years to 2030, is a time when we can get back on track, get set again, and position ourselves for what should be, by all senses, the rest of the century, where India becomes more and more important, a bigger player in all senses, and takes off. In the book, I've focused on 2030, as the title indicates, but I've just touched briefly on what we might be like in 2050 when we celebrate 100 years of a republic. And maybe later in the conversation, we'll just touch very briefly on that. But back to the title in a moment. India 2030, decisive decade, fair enough. I explained very briefly why decisive, and India 2030 is the deadline. But what is this business about animals? Are you in a zoo or what? I mean, Hippo, Gazelle or Hippo? And my worry was, I must share this with you. The publisher, I thought of putting that as a catchy title, say Gazelle or Hippo, India 2030. And I said, hey, hold on. It will go into all the zoology colleges in the country. And that's not what this book is about. So I said, I'm not an animal expert. So hold on. So why this? For many years now, people, particularly outside the country, and many magazines, including globally recognized, reputed ones like Economist, had covers which showed India as an elephant, big, ponderous, moving along slowly, but moving momentum, and maybe increasing momentum, but it's slow. And I said, hey, look, that's no longer the analogy. Now, one analogy was the tiger, which was popularized through 5-6 years back when we had our first round of Make in India. And as some of you would recall, there were some nice visuals on how the tiger transforms into, machinery, equipment, wheels, and so on. But to me, the tiger was not quite it. So I looked around and I said, where are we, where we might be, and where we want to be? And again, let me just summarize in 2 sentences. The hippo is an animal that, to me, and I guess to most of us, is large, somewhat fearsome, not very friendly. And if it gets at you, you want to run away. That's your first reaction. And one of the pictures I paint as a dystopian possibility in the book is India becoming like that. Ultra-nationalist, aggressive, especially with to our smaller neighbors. And these are perceptions. I'm not saying they're reality. We'll be perceived as a huge, ponderous creature, bullying people. And when we go towards them, they want to run away, not come towards us. And there'll be a degree of fear, but not of liking, and probably not of respect. So at worst, fear. At best, you might say fear, but not a very likable, friendly, good creature, though big and large, but also not agile, not able to move quickly. On the other hand, to me, a gazelle struck me as something really good. It's the kind of, nice looking, agile, very quick, very fast, quick moving, and yet very likable. And again, to give the same analogy, if a gazelle comes towards you, unless you're out in the jungle, completely in the wild, you'll be tempted to stop and maybe, even touch it, even an unknown animal, because it seems so friendly and so nice. And to me, this seemed at the extremes, the 2 options where the country might head by 2030. We could either seem, and again, perceptions, we may look at ourselves in any way, but the outside world may see us as one extreme as a hippo, at the other extreme as a gazelle. And through the book, of course, I make my point of view very clear. And as I've said right at the outset, I'm an optimist. I've taken an optimistic view. I have painted negative scenarios, but I have suggested that in my expectation, not just hope, we will overcome them and become positive. So that's a longish explanation of the title. But very quickly on the book, and this will come up more in our discussions, as Suresh summarized so well, it covers 9 main areas. Now, why these areas? Because I looked at what is it that might really influence where we might be in 2030. And there are lots of others, and many people, blame me for not looking at what they consider very important areas. For example, climate change. I agree it's critical. We ourselves in this country have gone through droughts, through floods, through all kinds of what are called extreme weather events, very, very heavy rainfall, sudden floods, all kinds of things. But very frankly, and you can question this assessment, it's terrible, but I don't think it's really going to affect us in the medium term, which means till 2030, global climate change, and therefore the local problems that we have will remain local. And they'll be horrendous. I mean, we saw what happened in Uttarakhand. We saw what happened in Kerala just this few weeks ago. But these are localized. I don't think they affect the direction, the momentum, the totality of the country, because we are such a large country. And these events tend to be localized. The larger problem of global warming, of carbon dioxide, of greenhouse gases is serious, real, and very frightening. But I don't think it's going to hit us by 2030. It may begin to show its signs, but I think not. Therefore, I left that out. Similarly, I left out a lot of other things. And I picked these 9 because I thought, number 1, they're influential. And number 2, many of them interrelate and affect each other. Let me give just one example. If you look at interrelated areas, and one that may concern all of you, and let me spend a minute or 2 on this. I'm sure many of you, many of the people here are, from my generation, and therefore are what I put in quotes as retired and unemployed, or grandfathering, as many of you are busy doing, but you're not in a regular job. But I'm sure you worry about, your sons, your daughters, your nephews, nieces, somebody who's in a job. And many of you, maybe also younger people who are in their 20s, 30s, 40s working. And you may wonder, with what you read about of automation, of technology, of robotics, what's going to happen to your job? And I can assure you of one thing, your job as it is today will not exist in 10 years from now. Okay, if not 2030, by 2040, your job will cease to exist. I can tell you that. But jobs in plural will continue. And the projection I have made is that because of technology, in fact, jobs will increase, not decrease, but there will be different kinds of jobs. They require different skills. They require different education, and therefore education. So you relate jobs, technology, and education. The other part of it is the demography. We are a young country with a huge population. Almost 2/3 of our country is below 35. And therefore, that gives us a special advantage in terms of what is known as demographic dividend. With a number of dependents, those like me who are over 60 or 65, and those who are below 16 or 18, below working age, as a proportion of the total population, is not large because our working age population is very large. In fact, getting to be the biggest in the world, even bigger than China already or in a few years. And therefore, we can be a powerhouse for driving things both in the country and globally. Also, young people means innovation, because young people means new ideas, it means fresh ideas, it means no fear of failure, it means risk-taking ability. And therefore, the possibility of our becoming innovative in all areas, including in technology, but not only technology, let me stress that innovation is also about social areas, is important. But demography is important in a couple of other areas also. And I want to spend a couple of more minutes mentioning those because I think they're very important. Many of us look at demography in the extreme. Those who are from older mindsets look at it as a population issue and therefore population control and what do we need to curb it. And even now some state governments are going, hammer and tongs at two-child family, and then it's got politicized and all kinds of things. But the fact is that the country as a whole is fast heading towards what's called replacement level, which in technical terms is a TFR of 2.1, which is just replacement. Many states, in fact, more than 26 states are already below that level. So that, of course, the momentum will make the population increase, but very clearly the curve has flattened, the growth curve has flattened, and very soon the absolute population will begin to flatten. And you will see already what you're seeing in Kerala, which is primary schools having to close down. No many children there. So this is one kind of change. At the other extreme, partly because of good healthcare, the number of people who are in the older age group is increasing, and increasing rapidly in percentage terms. The absolute number is yet small, but it's increasing. They will need not only healthcare and other kinds of care and social support. Many of them may be destitute and especially would need care, but many of them would be capable of contributing actively to society, provided we have the organizational mechanisms to let them contribute in what may be a new form of gig jobs. Many people look at the gig economy as something for youngsters, somebody in his or her 20s working in multiple places with no fixed job and, taking a month off a year or just taking 2 months off to go somewhere and working when they want, where they want, how they want, based on their skills. But similar gig work may begin to happen for those who are older because they don't want or can't take up a full-time job, which requires regularly a 9 to 5 kind of thing, but they may work part-time. And the same will be true of a large part of a female population, which unfortunately is yet substantially housebound, but can spare many hours a day to do something else. And again, linking other elements of this, it is technology that will enable this. As we have just seen in all the problems with COVID, the work from home has become work from anywhere and is practical. The whole IT industry, as Suresh was just telling us, very few of his people yet have to come to office. Some do because they want to do so by choice. But they've worked effectively in these last almost 18, 19 months from home and actually delivered to customers and clients. So that's possible. So that's one part of the demography. The other part, which is a somewhat scary part, though I think we'll find a solution. And let me spend again a minute or two on explaining this because many of you would know, but not all of you may know the background. Sometime in the mid-70s, 76, Parliament passed a law which froze the number of Lok Sabha seats based on the 1971 census. So the 1971 census said so many seats for example, Tamil Nadu. And that has stayed fixed, population going up or down irrespective. This was supposed to be there till 2006. In 2001, it was again extended and made applicable for another 25 years till 2026, which is a few years from now. So it's yet fixed. So number of Lok Sabha seats from Tamil Nadu, number of Lok Sabha seats from Kerala, number of Lok Sabha seats from UP, of course, now it's divided, but are same as what they were in 1971. Now look at a scenario that might emerge as we begin to get to 2026. Many people would argue, and you would see logic in this argument, saying, hey, this is a democracy, one person, one vote. So if I have a population of 1 million people, then they get to elect a certain percentage of the members of parliament. So they will get to have that number representing them. And look at the situation today. Today, I live apart the smaller states, Goa or Sikkim, which have one MP for less than 1 million people, like 600, 800,000 people, elect one member to parliament. On the other hand, in UP, Bihar, and Delhi, where I'm near, more than 3 million people are required to get one MP into parliament. So 3 million people have one representative. At the other extreme, you have 600,000, 800,000. But let's leave those states apart. Let's take a big state like Tamil Nadu. Even Tamil Nadu, one MP represents 2 million people. Not 3 million like UP or Bihar or Delhi. Now look at what might happen in 2026. These states, as we know, states like UP and Bihar are growing far more rapidly. Their population numbers have risen very rapidly already. States like Tamil Nadu, Kerala is, of course, the model people talk about, but even Tamil Nadu, some of you are familiar would know, has done a phenomenal job in health and also in therefore controlling families, not by controlling population, but by providing such good health care that people have chosen to have smaller families. Now, suppose you get to a one person, one vote scenario in 2026. You will have a huge predomination of members of parliament in Lok Sabha who come from the northern states, particularly from states like Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, where population has grown hugely. And you have a proportionately smaller number than today from states like Tamil Nadu, Kerala, even Karnataka and Maharashtra, where populations are stabilizing. Now, what would be the dynamics of this? Let me just take one example, linking again to a theme in my book, that education. The national education policy, as some of you would recall, the first draft, there was something about Hindi being taught. It was either, put in there as just a draft, or maybe it was misunderstood. But there was a lot of reaction to what was perceived as pushing Hindi all over the country. And states reacted. Many of the states reacted. The southern states a little more forcefully, Tamil Nadu probably most forcefully. And then it was withdrawn. Now, this is, I think, part of a political give and take, and so I'm optimistic. But very frankly, it may well have been because even today, Tamil Nadu does have a substantial number of MPs in parliament, and the South as a whole yet has a reasonably substantial number. Now, suppose that situation were to reverse, and you had a far smaller number of members of parliament. Would you have the same say? Would you have the same weight? Would you have the same ability to forestall something which you don't like? Now, this is dystopian. What it might lead to? Would there be centrifugal forces? Would people begin to say, what on earth, I'm doing so well, I'm contributing so much. I'm contributing so much to the national economy. Some of these states are not, and yet they have the same weight. There'll be unhappiness. What will it lead to? Now, my optimistic scenario, which I've taken an optimistic view, is that our political class has learned to handle these problems, as they have done over the last many years. And my hope is that we'll come to some kind of, modus operandi to get it over. Maybe one thing which I've sort of half suggested, you might say, maybe we'll have a Lok Sabha where there is, based on one person, one vote, where the North does dominate. And maybe the Rajya Sabha will be modified and changed to have a more, you might say, US Senate-like structure, where there's 1 seat or 2 seats or 5 seats per state. So it's not dependent on size or population, but it depends on states. And, you will then be able to build a consensus. I don't know. I'm just saying these would be possibilities that would emerge. So that's how I've linked up, all these various elements. Technology is a major thing going through. And one last sentence on economy, jobs, and technology. I see the future as being what I've called 3 Ds, which is all about decentralization, devolution, and digitization. Because when you digitize, you will be able to do a lot of decentralizing and devolution of power, because information access will be from anywhere. All the information you need will be available to you. So you can empower people at the grassroots, at the panchayats, not just the states, if you can, and devolve enough power to them by decentralizing. And the decentralizing will not be limited to political or other power or information, but also possibly to manufacturing. Because when you look at, possibilities of localized manufacture, of additive manufacturing, 3D, we do a design in a central place, get it produced where the demand is locally, get it produced where consumption takes place. You don't have economies of scale, but you have what I've called economies of scope. So depending on how much you're doing, you have economies of different kinds of things, but they may not be economies of scale like the old days. You don't need a plant with, 20,000 workers, which people like Sandilya used to, but you might have, 6, 7, 8 plants of 1,000, 2,000 workers each, or smaller. And these might be in district towns, in taluka towns. Why not? Even in villages, maybe. You have one village where you collect 100 people, and the IT industry has proved that that is possible. Break up the work, make it simpler, give people technology. They work one level above what their abilities are, and you can decentralize. So just a thought on where that might go. A lot more notes I have, but I will stop here because I've taken more time than I intended to. And back to you, Sandilya, your comments and thoughts, and any questions, of course, that you have first.
Well, Kiran, what do I say? I think over the last few minutes, you have covered the entire spectrum of what you have covered in the book. And summarized, yes, but you have already covered everything. And most of my questions have already been answered by you. Well, I don't know what to ask. You're putting me in a little tough start. Actually, the first thing that you answered is on the name of the book, and the subtitle is one of the questions I had, and you already answered. So that's to start with. But still, I would like to ask, Kiran, I think you did give some explanation as to what kind of prompted you. But what made you think of writing this book? And something must have made you kind of wonder. You have written so many other books, and what is it that kind of tickled you to write this book? I mean, that's, I think, though the title is clear, you have already explained it. I'm going to do some quote unquote criticism on your subtitle that I'll come to later. But first, I think we're into what made you write this book?
Well, it's been buzzing in my mind for some time, Sandilya, but let me tell you, my last few books moved from technology to a little more. One of the earlier ones was on pure technology. It was IT story, more or less. The second one was on innovation. But innovation, though I tried very hard to stray what I said earlier, that innovation, not just about technology, it's about social innovation. It's about literary innovation. I gave examples from film and literature, but it was substantially tilted towards, frankly, innovation in the technology space. The last book which I did was very much more on technology, but technology and its effect on society. So it was called Evolution, which for electronic, if you like, and evolution is how society has been changing with technology. But I wanted to look beyond just the social change because technology is affecting a lot of other things. But I realized, which all of us know, that it's not just about technology. What's changing and affecting a country is many other things. And at the same time, I was beginning to look at where are we headed and where should we be? Where can we be? And I think there are different issues. One is where can we be, which may be projections, trend lines, something else. But also more importantly to me was the question of where should we be? Where do we want to be? What's the objective? And so I looked at a book which would cover that kind of thing looking ahead.
Yeah, great. I think you did mention that you chose the 9 topics because you would have done 20 other topics, but you kind of prioritize them. And I think one can see the interlinkages between each one of them. And that's one of the reasons I decided that I'm not going to pick up chapter by chapter and go, but that will be very mundane kind of a thing. And any topic that you pick up is interlinked. And I think you've done it beautifully well in your last chapter. The overall things, the summarization that you have done is beautifully kind of linked up. All of them is what are the interlinkages. But all said and done, I just want to take a dig at you. When you talked about the subtitle Hippo and Gazelle, you can quite appreciate the thought behind Hippo as a choice. I mean, you mentioned that it's an animal which is very ferocious. You don't know what's going to happen, how it will attack, and you don't know. When it comes with a real bang. And it's very different from elephant or tiger and what have you. But you look at Gazelle, all is right. What you're saying is very agile. It can do things very soft, likable, and all that is fantastic. But it's also a prey for larger animals, right? I don't know whether you looked at that perspective in the analogy that, Gazelle is something which is hunted by the tigers and lions and it becomes a prey. But having said that, and I think I don't want to kind of dwell on it, don't want you to answer the question. I thought about it myself. I think as our country, with the kind of size that we have, the population that we have, the democracy that we have, and you look at all aspects of the demand supply thing, that the kind of population, the demand that it generates, it's actually a country which people look forward to engaging with, look forward to partnering with. And I think that's very clear. So we are talking about the second largest democracy in the world, or third largest in terms of the economic size, leave alone US and China. India could be the third largest. Given that kind of a thing, yes, we are size big enough that we can't be a prey. So I think I just want to stop there. So I compliment you on the subtitle that Hippo or Gazelle. I think it's very well said, and I think it's okay. Let me pick up the last chapter in a way on technology, which I think, as we have said, it encompasses all aspects of our life. Not just the IT that people normally refer to as technology, but I think you take any facet of it in terms of your manufacturing, or in terms of everywhere we have manufacturing, you've got robotics, and you've got supply chain logistics are being planned in a very, very different way. We're talking about drones, we're talking about all kinds of technology, things that are really encompassing. But yet, we don't know what it is likely to be 10 years hence, right? The velocity of change is so high, it's very difficult for us to predict. I mean, 20, 30 years ago, we never predicted we will have kind of smartphones like this and the people will be interacting with them. We never thought that we were going to have a work from home and, people will be able to kind of do things and work from anywhere, as you have suggested. All these things have happened very, very disruptive in a way, right? And I'm sure over the next 10 years, we will have far more disruptive things happening, which you and I cannot predict. We are not astrologers to predict what would happen. Given the scenario, what do you think of this country's ability to adapt to such disruptions? My questions are going to be out of syllabus in a way, Kiran. I'm not going to focus on your book, because your book people can read and understand what you have said in that. I think what I would like to provoke you is to get your thoughts behind such a thing, and what do you think could happen or needs to be done in the country of our size? Whether are we having the ability to adapt to such drastic disruptive changes that may come about? Yes, we have managed COVID very well, we have managed disruptions very well, but that's in the past. What do you think holds for the future?
I think both your comment and your question, Sandilya, are fantastic. I can't but resist making a brief comment on your first one on Gazelle. You're absolutely right, and you hit the nail on the head. And you're one of the few persons, very few I would say, who have perceived what I did mean. I'm talking of 2030, remember? When I said 2030, a Gazelle, as you rightly said, is likable, sleek, agile, good, but could be a prey for a large animal. And I meant exactly that, because by 2030, very frankly, and we may not like hearing it, I don't like saying it, but even by 2030, we are not going to be in a position to resist a large power. I'm not saying which. It could be the US, it could be China, it could be Russia tomorrow. By 2030, we will not. And therefore, like some smart animals, we have either got to be in a pack, which means allies, or we've got to find a friend, an elephant behind whom we can hide, or whatever, to take that analogy to its extreme. But you're absolutely right. And I'm so delighted that you're one of the few people who have caught that little nuance in the Gazelle. Everybody stopped at what I explained and taken it for granted. You're one of the few people who have seen beyond that. And that's exactly the slightly deeper intent of saying, look, let's be realistic. And I can give you figures with regard to China. We will be nowhere. Even if we grow at 8% and they grow only at 4%, which is unlikely. Militarily, economically, in terms of numbers and forces that are there, in terms of infrastructure on the ground, in terms of military might, frankly, we have to be realistic. And therefore, I think that realism has already dawned on us and our leaders some time back. And so, our alliances from which we stayed away are not yet alliances, but we're getting closer and closer to building partners. But let's leave that. Your other question, very interesting, very correct. Two parts of the answer, Sandilya, to you. First is I completely agree with you with the disruptive changes and the velocity of change that's happening in technology. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to predict what will come up tomorrow. And therefore, I've strongly recommended and suggested that especially the government, which is not very good at doing so, should not try to favor a particular industry, saying, we want to push electric vehicles, because you don't know 2 years from now, maybe hydrogen, maybe something else altogether will completely take over and demolish the electric vehicle industry. So they should not be favorites. they should not say pollution they should set a pollution standard and not say no IC engines. Maybe tomorrow somebody will come with a revolutionary IC engine that has no pollution. Who knows? So this is always the quarrel with the government, trying to be very specific, very detailed, very correct in its rule. What they need is a broad policy framework. For example, don't pollute and let's rate on pollution standards. Don't say no diesel cars. Anyway, that's an example. No diesel rickshaws, auto rickshaws. Rate on the pollution standard. But your other question, and I think this is a very important one, that how can we handle disruptions that come to us? Because frankly, though I hope, and I'm sure some will come out of here, some of the disruptive innovations will come from India, but there may be other ones that we are not geared for because of our lower investment in R&D or our lower manufacturing capability. And there may be things like, super high-speed trains or some new form of drones which come up and which we need to be prepared for. And you're right, I think our frameworks need to be adaptive and we need to be able to quickly handle those. No easy solution or a prescription of how, but broadly, yes. And I think the concept that you mentioned is critical, that we need to keep in mind that there'll be some things that come in from what you might say left field, or in today's World Cup days, you might say sudden googly that comes up, and we should be prepared. Don't be taken by surprise.
Thanks, Kiran. What you say is music to my ears, because in my interactions with the government, whenever we discussed on vehicle technology and pollution, I tell them, please don't tell us what technology to make. Please tell us what is your standard that you want in emission. Then we will manage the emission. But then you don't push us saying that you do this, you do that, and that doesn't really work. And so it's very well said, and I do hope people listen to the government on these issues. The next item I want to take up is on education, Kiran. I think it's one of the things which you are passionate about and I'm passionate about. And you are rightly so, you have appreciated what the Delhi government has done on the basic school education, which I think is fundamental. And I think the problem in our country is that the school education has been neglected so badly in the past and even currently. I think a lot of people don't even come to school. When they come to school, they don't have the right kind of wherewithal, the education, the infrastructure is bad and so on. And you're right, Delhi government, and I know for sure, and I've interacted with some of the parents in schools, done a wonderful job on creating infrastructure for the schools, and the parents are happy. In this, I want to just mention two things, two specific things. There is one person by name Prashant Srivastava. I am Ahmedabad 2012 batch person. He is not running for making $1 million in the corporate sector. He has dedicated his life to social sector. And what he's doing, and he's in Delhi, he has done a lot of work in the Delhi schools in terms of linking parents and teachers. Very unique methodology to ensure that the children get the right kind of education based on this. And he has made small groups of parents in terms of councils where they interact with the school teachers, principals, and so on and so forth. Wonderful work. He has covered thousands of schools in Delhi. He wants to grow. He wants to do things in Jharkhand. He wants to do in Maharashtra. Even COVID times, so he has had a lot of constraints. He has done a lot of wonderful work. But people like him have a challenge. They don't have funding. From 2014, he started, he's a 2012 graduate, and he's been coming to me every quarter. I used to mentor him a little bit, and he's got a lot of mentors. I've introduced him to a lot of people. He's getting some funds, but small funds here and there. But his example is something which can be multiplied in other states. Another example in Karnataka, one of my former colleagues, Mr. Heber, is doing excellent work in the rural areas. He wants to do for the education. He wants to get principals and headmasters to do something good for the children. He doesn't have the support of the political system. And he goes and knocks at the doors of bureaucrats and political. He is finding a big wall. So my question is, if Delhi government has done wonderful things, there are people like the Prashants and the Hebers who want to do things in this country. Why can't the governments encourage them? Why don't we ensure that they get the right kind of funds so that the country can improve? It is not any political party or any single individual. My question, therefore, Kiran, is that if Delhi Metro can become a kind of a model for all the metros in the other states, why can't the Delhi education model become a model for all the states to emulate and follow, leaving aside all the political issues and things like that? What's your take on this?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Sandilya, I've said some, I think, very complimentary things about what the Delhi government has been able to do in the last, 5-6 years to Delhi schools. And, to put this in context, because there are so many people here from the management stream, I always give them this example. And I remember mentioning this many years back to those who now run the Delhi government. And I found that they were with me, in fact, maybe ahead of me, saying, look, the government, whom we all tend to criticize for one thing or the other, has created institutions which are the benchmark in this country in at least two areas. One is engineering, which is the IITs, and one is management, which is the IIMs. Plus, there are other areas where they've set the benchmark. It may be design, like National Institute of Design in Ahmedabad, and maybe in a few other areas. They've done it. So it's not the government can't do it. So I always tell them that, look, if you could do this for higher education,
why not for
in these areas? Why not for schools, which is so much more important?
Absolutely.
And it's only the Delhi government that resonated and has tried to do wonderful things. And I'm sure there are other states that are doing this, which I'm not so familiar with. I've heard good things about Kerala. On the parent-teacher thing which you mentioned, I've heard very good things from Orissa. So there may be others. But the Delhi government has done this in a big way, in a very visible way. And the important thing has been that they've brought in a lot of new ideas, put in resources in it, which is also important, to small things. They painted the schools and made them nice. If you go to a Delhi government school now, it's something that children like to go to. It's not a horrible place. They've just redone the furniture. And the furniture now, when you walk into a classroom, is amazing, and children just love it. And their whole attitude towards school has changed. And then on the curriculum side, they've brought in some changes. They've got what is called the happiness, curriculum. And people have their views on that, but it's there. They've now got a Deshbhakti curriculum, which is conceptually a good idea. It worries me what it might lead to, but I think the idea is good. Those are separate. But the important thing is that they've tried to do things with regard to improving school education in a serious, organized, and big way. But many of these innovations, to come to your question, Sandilya, specifically, in this case, the Delhi government had a few people within who triggered this, and a few people in the leadership who were committed and keen on this, just as they were on health and the Moza health clinics, which you're very familiar with, and you had mentioned to me too. But a lot of these ideas come from people like you mentioned, like Prashant Srivastav, or your friend in Karnataka. And somehow these ideas stay limited. And even if they're partly funded, they work in 10 schools, 50 schools, they never scale. And that's a challenge which we must take up, that how are you able to pick up these innovations and drive them to scale? Either by providing funding to those people who can do this and who have done it themselves, or picking that innovation and adapting it into the larger system, for example, the government system. Now, the second part, many people talk of, but I think is very difficult. I know people have tried to do it, among others. I'm sure there are many others. The Premji Foundation has tried to do this in Karnataka. They work with the government only, and have tried to help them to improve various things. And maybe they've done it well. But I've not seen a revolutionary change of the type, or you'd say quantum change of the type you've seen in Delhi. Maybe it will happen, but I don't know. But this is critical, and I think we need to pay more attention to this. I've suggested on and off, and those who are here on call and are influential may do this, that just like the government has set up startup funds for various technology startups, can they create a startup funds for innovations in education, which should be a social impact fund? Don't look for returns. Don't say, what's your IRR? Your IRR is how the children are happier and better educated. So I think that's the IRR. And the Delhi government once again has shown this. It's a very bad index, but the academic performance has been excellent.
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, it's better than private schools in most areas, and better than the top private schools in some areas, the best ones. They've also introduced new things. It's not just about academics, about things like summer classes, about having fun outside school. And one of the education institutions, higher education that I'm involved with, we've encouraged the students to go and tell these children not about academics, not about computers, but about just life skills.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a broad sense. So I think these kinds of things need to be encouraged. And if somebody can have the government or some great philanthropist set up a fund which can do this for social innovations, there's funds for social innovations, but specifically for education, I think it will be a big contribution.
Fantastic. And I must say that Prashant is also doing it. He's done thousands of schools he has covered only with the help of Delhi government. He's not done it alone. I think I must say that it's a joint partnership that he has done. Let me now jump to healthcare, Kiran. I think, again, in the interest of time, I want to kind of be a little more quick. This is one area where you have also covered a lot about rural healthcare. You have said how technology can make the healthcare go to the rural levels in terms of telemedicine and a combination of network connectivity and what have you. But I have a very fundamental question. Of course, we have managed the pandemic through us a lot of things, the gaps that we have in the system, which is, I think, a very, very stark reality. But anyway, quickly they managed it. They kind of, a lot of corporates and others jumped into the fray, and we had the resilience to kind of come back and make things work. But that's fine. There's a positive side of things, what happened in the pandemic. But I have a very controversial point to make here. Many of our hospitals, they call them multi-speciality hospitals. When they talk about multi-speciality, they talk about various kinds of diseases that they will handle under one roof. Very few government hospitals give a holistic aspect of healthcare in terms of providing a choice to the patient in terms of whether he wants to take the allopathic system or the homeopathic system or the Ayurvedic system or the Siddha system or whatever. So why can't these multi-speciality hospitals offer the choice to the patients in terms of integrative medicine? In fact, Sloan Kettering has a separate department for integrative medicine. One of my friends had gone there for 3 weeks to attend to that area, and he came back with a lot of knowledge in terms of how even US is looking at treatment as in a holistic manner. So I'm looking at a holistic way of looking at healthcare and not just do. So that means the treatment protocols have to be different. What are your thoughts on it? I know it's a very controversial point because many of the private sector hospitals would not like it because their ROI will not come through this. However, if the primary objective of hospitals is to provide care to people who need care. And let me give just one example of this and I will stop here. There is a surgical oncologist in Delhi. I met him in one of the small group meeting, which is called the Quantum Institute for Wellbeing, started by Tony Anurup Singh, you may know, in Delhi. And I was one of the life members of his Quantum Institute, first member to become a member of his Quantum Institute. And he brought in a lot of experts in a variety of healing things to have come and talk about what they have done in their field of healing. I quote healing, not just treatment of the hospital. And this surgical oncologist made an honest statement. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm telling you, I am not God. Even we may be doing something with our knowledge. We can do to the hospital, we can treat patients, but we are not healers. The patient gets well, he goes there. We can't promise anything. We can't promise him life because that's not in our hands. However, I am open to permit the patient to take alternative healing if that helps him overall improve his health and well-being, rather than just my treatment of chemotherapy or radiology and get his cancer down and he is giving me a few more years of life. But his life doesn't change in terms of holistically, in terms of healing. So he said, I'm open. I mean, he admitted openly that, listen, we are not gods, we can't do it. So why can't that kind of a thing happen in the private sector hospital when there's a multi-specialty, provide multiple protocols? I'll stop here. What are your comments?
Yeah. Well, a very brief response, Sandilya. You answered the question right away in the beginning saying there's no ROI. The ROI comes from doing multiple tests and they are really in allopathy. I mean, how do you get a CT scan, an X-ray, a sonography, an ECG, all done on one patient who seems sick, and tell him that, maybe genuinely required, but tell him that, look, I need to do all these tests to then figure out what's wrong with you. So, you're right. I think a holistic view is required. The problem at the other end, though, and I must mention this, I know many people are feel very strongly that some of the traditional systems, not just Indian, but around the world, are effective and good. And that's very true. The problem with those is that they're not well codified. And therefore, you get a lot of quacks and fakes. And that has given it a bad name. You take homeopathy or Ayurveda, you don't know. Very often they give you a placebo. Very often they give you I'm told some of them give you an antibiotic put into that pill, and then it cures you and you say, wow, what fantastic things. So I think the problem is that there's no proper certification of either the people or the medicines or codification. Now that is the way it functions actually, but till we reach that, I think there are some issues there. But overall to your question, I think you're absolutely right. Integrative medicine is the answer. Even if you don't have a single hospital which should do that, it is really a look at the totality of the person, including, very importantly, their mental state.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm a very fond of that mental state. We ignore that. The system ignores the mental state because many of the human problems, physical problems, are the root cause is mental. I keep telling people your anxiety and stress causes all kinds of problems. Your cancer is because of a stress that you have experienced in your life. So, I mean, I dwell in this a lot in my own personal this thing out of sheer interest. So I understand this issue. But I agree with you on the ethics part, Kiran. I agree with you that there are quacks coming up. The quacks are there in the allopathic system as well.
Oh, absolutely, agreed.
Many doctors, when you don't need, they give you steroids because you want a quick treatment. And I think hospitals don't have ethics because you said rightly, they overcharge you, they do all kinds of which are not required. So I think it's a basic ethics which is important, not so much in terms of what, I mean, ethics in the doctors, in the allopathic system or the hospitals or whatever have you. But I think at the end of the day, I think that's a societal issue, which I do hope things improve. In the interest of time, I just want to cover the next 5 minutes. I'll take a little extra because 7 I wanted to stop. The other point you have covered in your book is very well is on livelihoods. Okay. In livelihoods, what I look at it, and I think you have covered a lot on this issue in terms of rural economy. And I think what we have looked at rural in the past so many years or decades is as if it's an agricultural economy. My question is, and I have always been stating it, that rural does not mean agriculture. Rural has got plenty of potential. Today, in fact, many IT companies are going rural to pick up talents and then start various kinds of activities in terms of services. Okay, so why can't that proliferate and create a kind of a rural economy which is so strong, by which process what we can do is we need education and skilling, which is what is required. With technology, I'm sure we can provide both. Then what will happen is we will stop this rural urban migration, that people are moving from rural to urban, which is creating different kind of societal problems. I'm commenting a few things that you have already covered in your book in an integrative manner. In the interest of time, I don't want to ask questions on each one of them. I'm asking one holistic question, that why can't this happen in a real way, that we create livelihoods in the rural sector by promoting rural economy? And that's what I thought we would like to comment. You can comment on this, please.
That's absolutely my hope, Sandilya, that we can do just that, create livelihoods in the rural areas. It requires 2 or 3 things which we need to focus on. One is, of course, connectivity. And since physical connectivity sometimes takes time, not sometimes, it inevitably takes time, we should start at least with strong electronic connectivity, which will enable what you mentioned and I talked of earlier, industries like IT, but not only IT, to be able to get people to work from there. And that's entirely possible now if you have a good, strong IT connection. More than that, of course, you can get health, education delivered there and back. And there are more and more examples about how that connectivity helps, whether it's a small website for a craftsman producing something in a village, which can be sold somewhere, not just in urban India, but around the world.
Around the world.
More and more things.
Around the
world. It really, I think connectivity is critical. We've done some good work now on this thing through the Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, which builds rural roads. We need to quickly, BharatNet as a network which is supposed to take broadband to every panchayat in the country has been on the cards for now. I've been associated with it intensely myself for more than a decade. 10, 12 years. It's not moved, it's not yet there. And it's not that difficult a job. Just got to get the right organization structure and the right incentives. Maybe like roads I've been suggesting for a long time, do a reverse auction, do a subsidy for those who want and let them bid on reverse subsidy. Whatever way, let's get it going because it's critical to create just what you said, jobs and livelihoods in rural areas, which are not agriculture dependent. I mean, there's no harm in increasing agriculture, which it will. But can we look at other things that come up there, other opportunities, and stop the flow into urban areas? In fact, my hope, which I've mentioned in the book, and that's a dream, you might get a reverse flow because, it's so much nicer to stay in clean air, no traffic jams, in a nice small town, small place, but provided you have the infrastructure.
We hope we don't pollute.
Good education, good health.
We only hope they don't pollute them. In your chapter on the 2050 scenario, you have covered the 3 Ds, which you talked about, demography, diversity, democracy. Then you converted it and say democracy, decentralization, devolution. I had put 4th D, digitization, but you covered in your introduction, you actually changed it. From your book, you said, why not digitization? I'm happy you did that. And that's one of my questions that I had today. Why not have digitization? You already covered that. Last thing that I would like to leave it and then get into question answer because I already a little overshot my time. I like your vision for 2050, making India becoming the happiest country. I know here you have met happiness is not just in terms of the country. You looked at a variety of areas in which the happiness could be manifested. And I would like you to just cover briefly in terms of what did you really mean by the happiest country and how can that dream be achieved? I know you are an optimist. I am an optimist. I'm a born optimist. You're a super optimist. That's the thing. We are 2 optimists talking about subjects on which and we want to remove the pessimism because I think my belief is positive thinking, positive statement, positive belief. And I think we should breathe positivity to ensure things happen the right way. So now with that statement, your comment on the happiest minds.
Yeah. Well, though I'm an optimist, I must say that even in 2050, I don't think we are going to be the richest country, either in terms of per capita income, certainly not, but not even in terms of GDP. Yeah. I don't think we will be the militarily most powerful, though we may be somewhere in the top 2 or 3, but I don't think we will be. So, I therefore look at those as being secondary. I think the most important thing is, can we be a happy country? And let me stress something again, Sandilya. I don't think it's a competitive thing because you can argue about happiest. So I've not said happiest, I've said happy country. And happy country, you're right. My definition is that every individual should be able to live a life in which there is a home, a guaranteed education and health, power. Somewhere I've said happiest, you're right.
Yeah, you have said it. It doesn't matter.
But you know, a good life which is comfortable, social harmony, most important. So there's comfort, personal safety, personal security. So all the things which we, you know, hanker after: clean air, clean water, guaranteed there. But I think by 2050, those are entirely feasible. They are not just dreams. They're entirely feasible if we set ourselves to it. In fact, maybe even before 2050, we can do that. And if you do those things, I'm sure we'll be a happy country. We're a happy people. We like to smile, we like to chat, we like to interact. No reason why we can't be happy people, as long as you fulfill these basic requirements.
You and I can hope to be there in 2050 also. You know, we would be, of course, past a century, but I do hope we'll be the happy country to be seen in India. With that, thank you very much, Kiran, for giving me the opportunity to interact with you. It's been a lovely session. I think you've been great. And I once again compliment you on this book, the kind of details that you've gone into, the kind of frankness. Now over to Group Captain for the question answer session. Sorry, I'm 5 minutes behind what I thought I would conclude at 7 o'clock, but I'm sure the discussion was overall enjoyable. Thank you very much. Over to you, Group Captain.
Thank you, sir. Very inspiring. And I think with your permission, we can extend by another 5 minutes. Is it okay with both of you?
Yeah, no problem.
A number of questions that come on social media. Now, I request all the people watching the program in Zoom, please the chat box. You can put your question. If there are any, I think I know you are so much focusing on the talk. Now you can check your questions. And we got over 750 viewers watching the program, and we got some very senior corporate leaders also watching the program. I'll now request them in case they have any questions. Then I'll move on to the YouTube. Mr. Balraman, do you have any question for the panel, please?
Yes. Kiran, I personally think that both China and Pakistan constantly troubling us on the border serves India as a motivator to build infrastructure. And in building defense infrastructure, we do build the science and technology. And India as a country, as you know, in India as a country, anything gets done only if it is a necessity, and defense is a necessity because, you are threatened in the border and enemy comes inside your border. So you have no choice. So I believe that we are in a very advantageous position there. I mean, many people might think that it's a nuisance and they may say it's a fear, but when it is a threat, when your border is threatened, you are justified in doing many things.
Yeah, but absolutely. I think it may trigger both, as you rightly said, technological development. It may speed it up. It will also speed up our infrastructure. You're right. Let me make one side or tangential comment as a footnote to what you said about China and Pakistan. I think we need, as the Chinese had, fortunately, 30 years of peace where we can focus on economic development, on social development, on health and education. And one suggestion I've made, which is a hope, it's only a hope. This one I don't say is an expectation, it's my optimism, is that we can come to some kind of modus vivendi with both China and Pakistan.
Utopia.
We agree that we will freeze borders till 2050. Let's not even talk about it. Just freeze them with a clear understanding, no terrorism, no cross-border thing. Just freeze where we are, a sort of standstill position till 2050. And, as I said, I don't think it will happen. I don't think it's realistic. But if we can do that, we'll have another 30, 35 years, 25 years of trying to push our development and get to the stage where they are. As I repeat, the Chinese did this very shrewdly, very cleverly. They bought peace from the little problems that they had in the 60s with us, the 70s, the little thing with Russia, some of you may recall, something with Vietnam. But after that, they just bought peace and built up their own strength. I think there's something to learn from there about what we might do, but it's unrealistic.
Very unrealistic, Kiran. I must say it's utopian because having got the strength, now they are flexing their muscles. Okay. And if you look at what has happened in Afghanistan, it actually creates more worries than this. But anyway, I think I believe in positive thinking. We do hope things will work out better. That partnership may not take place, but the mere strength that we have in various other factors would hopefully we don't become a prey to these large giants. Okay.
Actually, Kiran, I think in India, if you have peace, then you have internal differences and internal worries. We do not pull together as a country unless there is external threat.
That's a problem.
So an external threat is really an advantage. You see, the mistake that China and Pakistan make is that just about the time Prime Minister is standing for election, they threaten you at the border. Immediately he gets elected. Indians unite behind him. So they really do India a lot of favor by constantly threatening us. We really don't have a threat because we are a nuclear armed country. All that you need is one atom bomb, right? And so I don't think that we have any genuine threat.
Thank you, Mr. Balraman. I move on to the questions from the social media. In the meanwhile, if there's any question from Mr. Madhavan or Mr. BG Kurian, please keep it ready so that we'll move on to you next time. Here's a question from Mr. Ashraf from Coimbatore. He said, sir, eradication of poverty, the global hunger index, India's position is not so good. The position has also adversely impacted the programs of the government. The pandemic also impacted adversely. What's your advice to ensure that totally no hunger and India right on top by 2030 in terms of global hunger index?
Well, I think by 2030, we need to push ahead vigorously on some of the programs which we already have, but which need to be pushed more, which is to make sure that those who are at the bottom of the pyramid, who have just now problems of earning capability. So it's not that the food supply is in short, as you know, all of us know the granaries are overflowing. There's no demand from those people who need food because they don't have money. So we've just got to do things like the MGN, the Mahatma Gandhi NREGA, which has put money into rural areas, provided some employment. I know many people looked at it as a dole. Call it what you will. I think it's been good and it's helped the rural economy. So I think we've got to look at more ways, maybe cleverer ways, maybe more schemes which do this, because we've got to make sure that hunger goes. And it's not just hunger, it's nutrition. Let's remember that. And I'm very happy the government has started a nutrition mission because the nutrition mix is important, especially for young children. And Sandilya is an expert in this area. I don't want him to get into this, but I know he deals a lot with children and he knows what it means, when you have low nutrition and not enough calories.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Suresh, you have a question. Would you like to ask yourself or shall I read it on your behalf? Suresh?
Yeah. I think efforts are all on towards creating sustainable planet and targets for zero emission. I just wanted to see how we can ensure the same, addressing all the political issues and the people participation also that is required. It's some corporates definitely will achieve, but overall there may be a lot of challenges to achieve this 2030 sustainability goals. So any advice on that?
No, it's a tough one, Suresh. You're so right, because there's some corporates who have done it very well, but there are lots of others who haven't. And we are at the stage of development where it's difficult. I mean, take one of our biggest polluters, which is power stations. And we have very little option but to keep burning coal. And especially now where oil and gas prices have shot through the roof. Even coal prices have gone up, but at least we have domestic supplies. If we can rank them up, then we don't have to import as much. So I think for us, it's a very, very tough call, and it's come at a bad time. We will have to make some commitments, both in our own interest, frankly, in our own interest, but also world pressure on, zero emissions or lowering emissions, net zero by whatever date we are saying now, 2050, 2060. But I do think we have got to work towards that in our own interest, and we need to stress that. But again, Suresh, maybe I'm not a technophile, but I do think that technology will provide some solutions to some of this. If you have better technology, even for example on coal, if you do coal bed methane conversion, it's a possibility. It's expensive yet, it's difficult, but you have things like that which are options. So I think technology can push some solutions, and we need to work hard on that simultaneously, even as we begin to look at what we need to do. But you're right, it's a very important issue, and we've got to make sure there's people's participation in getting it going.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, sir. It's a question from Mr. Raghuram from Chennai. He says, sir, the $5 trillion is the dream of our Honorable Prime Minister by 2025. Can we expect $10 trillion economy by 2030? What's your view on this?
No, look, let's be realistic. There's no way whatsoever. And I'm being very realistic. But whoever says what, it's nice for any political leader to say that. First, they said 5 trillion without specifying a den date. Now we're saying $10 trillion economy. Of course, we'll be a $10 trillion economy. But when? As of now, frankly, from where we are today, if we grow at 8% a year every year, which is not going to be easy, we will just about cross 5 trillion in 2030. 5 trillion. So it's going to take a while. That's why we've got to be realistic about these things. And so will we catch up with China? not even by 2050.
No way.
No way. As I said, we've got to understand the dynamics of this, despite disruptive change, possibilities of all kinds of things. So I think we've got to understand where it is and plan accordingly, because the worry about such things is a very nice goals to set. As a poet had said, if your reach doesn't exceed your grasp, what's a heaven for? So it's nice to have that big dream, but your grasp is not going to be quite there, and you can't plan based on some imaginary target. Your planning has to be based on realism.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Well said.
Here's a question from Mr. Vasudevan from Bangalore, sir. So he says the world is the crossroad today, and we are neither a bipolar Cold War nor a multipolar world, though perhaps tending towards a world of several power centers. We are in the world between the orders. The lack of coherent international response to the COVID-19 pandemic is a proof of absence of international order and the ineffectiveness of multilateral institutions. In this context, do you mean to say that globalization is there to stay, or globalization just another thing passed by?
Well, despite all the protectionism that's happening, I think globalization is not going to go away. And the simplest index is to look at the amount of trade, the trade that goes on between people who are not really friends. Look at China-US trade. More importantly, look at China-India trade. And I don't know how many of you know the actual figures. Many of you may be familiar, but not everybody. This year, post Ladakh, post all the troubles you've had in the border, our trade with China is yet the biggest. Our biggest trading partner in the world is not the US. It's not through the Middle East or the Gulf countries. It is China.
And imports.
Because this is the interrelationship that comes from globalization. These are global supply chains. They can't be changed overnight. They can't be changed suddenly. There is advantage in global supply chains. So I think globalization is not going to go away. But yes, there is going to be some degree of concern and pushback and occasional back and forth. And the sooner we realize it, the better. Because Atmanirbhar Bharat is a great idea, a great concept. I grew up through that in the 60s and 70s when I was just beginning to work, and I worked in ISRO, where it was a concept because we just couldn't get anything in any case. There were sanctions all over. We had to do everything ourselves. But look, we can't be completely self-dependent, nor is it worthwhile. There are things which you have to import because they're cheaper, better, or not available. And therefore, there are things you have to export. So you need trading partners. And by isolating ourselves, staying out of all trade pacts, trashing all FTAs, I don't think that's the way to go. But that's a longish answer. I think globalization is here to stay. It goes through ups and downs. The long-term trend curve is, yes, globalization yet on.
If not, it's a disaster.
Right, so I'll take to maybe the last question. Number of questions that come. The chat box is more of comments. They said you should totally exempt income tax from donations and for education. Some people said with the corruption and what's happening today, we can never compete with China. You can see that. Here's a question from Mr. Francis from Nagpur. He says, the serious discussion or concern on the AUKUS, which you must know, so that is Australia, UK, and the US, got into a sort of agreement, has revealed the hazards of group diplomacy. Is it a time for us to actively engage and review the SAARC movement and without holding on to ego and more cooperation so that our regional stability is very well maintained? What's your view on this?
Well, I think we have played the game very cleverly with regard to alliances. So we are in the Quad, but it's not an alliance. As I said, it's not like the AUKUS, which is very clearly an alliance that is pretty close to a military alliance. So I think we've been quite clever in playing this, and we should continue doing that somewhat ambiguous but somewhat connected thing, which we did for many, many years in our nuclear program very successfully. So I think that's the direction in which we should continue to go in terms of where we are on how we look at these foreign policy things. With regard to SAARC, it's a dream which I guess many of us may have shared at some time, saying, hey, the whole South Asian fraternity, we are basically one civilization. I mean, if I meet my Punjabi friends, they're closer probably to Punjabis in Pakistan, as long as you don't talk of citizenship, than they are to me, and certainly far closer than they may be to somebody from Chennai or Trivandrum. And the same about people from West Bengal and Bangladesh. So we are really, and same between Tamil Nadu and Sri Lanka, a lot of them. But unfortunately, we have got divided up. So one just hopes that one day SAARC will revive and become something which is a force in itself and protects its external borders. With regard to whether it be China or somebody else, that SAARC is a force in itself. But that's only a dream. as long as our Indo-Pakistan problems continue, which is never going to realize.
Thank you, sir. And a question from Ravi from Chennai. I'll take one more question after this, and we'll come to the thing. As requested, 5 minutes, we'll get over by then. And sir, democracy is good. It gives a lot of freedom to Indians. And how much democracy has impacted our growth? And is the total freedom is a sin for us? That has also impacted our growth, and so many things are happening is because of the democracy.
Well, you can argue, and many people will give you figures to prove how not just China, but countries like Korea or Taiwan grew the fastest when they did not have democracy. And then it came later. And there are those who argue that, look, keep aside all your, nice ideas. The fact is that democracy should come when you reach a certain stage of development. I don't agree at all, because when they talk of development, they're meaning only economic development. I think the way we have developed, in the true sense of the word development, is because of democracy, the kind of empowerment that our people have, the kind of abilities to do what they do. I think that's absolutely critical. And that to me is development. It's not just economic growth. It's not just per capita income. I think it's very important to keep that in mind. I know Amartya Sen has argued this very well, saying that it's because of India's democracy that we have not had the kind of famines, even in the worst years, that we used to have earlier. It's because we are an open democracy that reveals things, that things get blown up. We saw this in COVID. Lots of criticism, which I wish, of course, those in power would take it a little more, not rightly, but would accept it a little more. But I think it helped a great deal, because it immediately, look at the correctives. Look at today, the oxygen availability around the country in hospitals.
Ventilators.
In 6 months, just amazing. I mean, this is because of democracy, because it was reported. Suppose it had never been reported, we had suppressed everything. I don't think we would have got where we are.
Innovation is also promoted.
Absolutely, you said it. Democracy, innovation is driven by democracy. The freedom to think.
Freedom to think, freedom to innovate, freedom to try. All this comes only with the democracy, not in a autocratic environment. Yeah.
True. Well, one last question for the evening, sir. It's from Mr. Gurumurthy from, again, Chennai. He says, health for all. The government of India ambitious plan for the development of medical infrastructure around India is great. But still, the poor do not have access to the good medical care. What is the need, sir? Because at the end of the day, the poor suffer, the middle class suffer. And during the pandemic, you must have seen very chaotic situation all over. What is the solution you think, and how much we should, in terms of GDP contribution to healthcare, and which should be taken seriously and implemented?
Well, I'm hoping that one long-term, I hate to put it that way, but silver lining from the whole COVID pandemic may be a strong focus on health and healthcare. We've been dismal. Frankly, this has been one of our big failures. And my book has all the figures, which I won't quote. Our spending on health has been absolutely abysmally low, just shameful, which is why in many indicators of health, we are below countries, in the worst countries, in the worst hit parts of Africa. I mean, it's really shameful. I hang my head in shame when I think of that. Why haven't we done more? But, these are political compulsions. And my hope, which I've argued in the book, is not only will COVID force us to do that, but the political scene is changing. And I give the example again of Delhi, because party I live here, but in the Delhi last elections, one party campaigned on a lot of very broad, general issues which may stir emotions. The other party campaigned on simple things: health, education, safety. And they won. And they won by a massive, massive margin. They got 80% plus, maybe almost 90% of the seats. And that tells me what people are beginning to say. And politicians, whatever else you may say about them, are very clever. They see this. So my hope is that politicians around the country have seen this and say, hey, better focus a little more at least on health and education. And that will drive the agenda to me. I'm hopeful, but it's just now the situation, frankly, is dismal. A lot more has gone into it in the last 1 year thanks to COVID, but we need to sustain it and not lose count or not lose focus on the need for public health, particularly, as the questioner rightly asked, in rural areas for the poorer people for whom health is a disaster. One sickness and they're in debt for the rest of their life.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. I think we have come to the end of the evening. It's a very fascinating evening. We only wish it's continued. People would have got inspired. We could see the comments what you had received. Each one of them are so happy to have so much of knowledge on the entire gamut of what's happening around in the India, not only in India, around the world. Thank you, Mr. Sandilya, and thank you, Mr. Kiran Karnik, for sparing your valuable time. And over 800 people are watching this program. And as a token of our appreciation, before that, let me also tell our viewers who are watching not to miss. We have another event jointly we are doing with IMA Alumni Association as a knowledge partner. We are going to have a serious discussion similar to one on the theme of the book, Of a Century and Still at the Crease, a journey through 50 plus years of management professionals. It's authored by Mr. B.G. Kurian, and we have again excellent. We have a panel with Casey John will be moderating. Mr. Sandilya is again accepted to join us, and Charlata Ravi, Managing Director, Ravi Kumar, Managing Director, Accenture will be joining us. It's happening at MMA. I will take this opportunity to welcome each one of you to MMA Management Center. Do come. It's an event jointly with IMA Alumni Association. Please do come. You'll be able to catch up with all your old friends as you're doing happening this evening. Now, once again, thanks so much, sir, for a fascinating evening. Great insight. I'm quite sure many people will take the initiative to buy this book and read, because it should be a very good reference book. And it's a great book for my library. And I'm quite sure many of our members will immensely benefit reading this book. And thanks so much. As the token of our appreciation, what we do when we are separated by distance, and on your behalf, we'll be happy to present the 200 face mark to the needy people. In addition to that, because you're sparing a valuable time, that's what makes MMA really, really privileged with number of lectures, a number of organizations. We go around, organize a vaccine campaign, we also can vaccine camps. We also go give rations to some of the people around who are really poor. This is usually what MMA does all through the pandemic, even now continuing, only because of the support what you give, and bringing some outstanding speakers and outstanding thought really inspire us to do this to all our members on behalf of our members. Thank you so much, sir. And once again, thanks to Mr. Balraman for joining, and thank you, Mr. Suresh Madhavan, for facilitating a great evening. Once again, thanks so much. Mr. B.G. Kurian, looking forward to seeing you soon in Chennai on 25th, and we are eagerly waiting to listen to you and the entire panelists. Thanks all so much for the wonderful evening. Stay safe, stay healthy. Till we meet again. Bye-bye. Keep watching.
Thank you, Suresh, and thank you, Group
Thanks
Captain.
a lot.
Really appreciate the excellent gesture of your giving the masks. That's excellent.
That's
and
excellent.
Thank you, Sandilya and Madhavan especially.
My compliments to also the MMA for doing this. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed the evening. And thanks, Kiran, for kind of making me do this. And thanks, Madhavan, who forced me to get into this. Thank you very much. Really enjoyed the evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.